Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer. Welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment podcast, the last episode of 2024. So have a safe night out there tonight and Happy New Year tomorrow. Pete Strouse joins us today. A little bit of a different slant. We're going to talk a little bit about staffing. He is the CEO and founder of InfoSec Connect and also the founder and host of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat podcast. That's a mouthful there. Pete, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
So tell me about your career journey. How and why did you get into both the human resource and talent side and then mixing that with the InfoSec need side?
Well, I think for a lot of recruiters, it's kind of the same story. We kind of fell into it. It seems like nobody really chooses recruiting as a career. Nobody as a kid is thinking, oh, I want to be a recruiter when I grow up. It's it's more so something that we do when we discover that, hey, maybe we have some customer service and sales skills, or maybe we just like talking to people. Maybe we have.
For what it's worth, I didn't choose cybersecurity InfoSec when I was a kid either. But anyway.
There you go. Yeah. So I started my recruiting career in IT recruiting. Quickly discovered that it just kind of made sense to me. All the technical terminology and relationships between technical terms just kind of clicked. And I feel like for some recruiters, they struggle with that. But for me, it just kind of made sense. So when I was at the large staffing firm that I was at the time, they had me working on the toughest to fill most technical roles. So quickly discovered kind of a niche there, and then was approached by a security compliance consulting firm, audit firm here locally in Tampa by their founder, and they were at like 15 employees at the time. Said basically they wanted to build an HR and recruiting department from scratch. So came on board there. I was the only person doing all the recruiting and all the HR from 15 employees up to 125 employees. Started a campus recruiting program, applicant tracking system from scratch, certification tracking system from scratch, built a lot of things from scratch, and then did all the recruiting over 100 people in 2.5 years. So that was a pretty wild ride. That was my first foray into InfoSec. Discovered that it just, again, kind of made sense to me. I had a passion for the field very quickly. I found it extremely interesting and challenging. And then when I moved on from the consulting firm, started my first recruiting firm, InfoSec Hires, with a previous partner of mine. Ran that for about 2.5 years, and then coming up on 4.5 years now with InfoSec Connect, my own firm. So been helping companies of all different sizes hire InfoSec folks from really from analyst to CISO. I mean, it's a pretty broad range of roles that I've filled and worked on over the years. Some sales and marketing as well, more go-to-market stuff, especially here recently. So I've seen a pretty broad range.
Well, I was going to opine on your time with the Tampa firm, and I know what firm it is because you listed on your LinkedIn. And I just wanted to say that you must have done a very good job with talent acquisition there, because right before this podcast, I actually was in their certification system that they use for customers, which they have built out over the years. They've become quite a presence in the field. So that's interesting to hear that you laid the groundwork for that. But certainly, everything with regards to talent in the industry seems to be a mess right now in some ways. You hear of jobs being posted, and within minutes, they have dozens of applications. Within a day, they have several hundred. You hear of folks that are having issues like just even getting an interview. They can't get past that automated system. And yet on the other side, we've got small and mid-sized businesses that continue to have the threats of to their information and their information security. So we'll start there. Just from your perspective, what's one of the most significant threats with regards to information security, cybersecurity for small and mid-sized businesses?
Well, I think the main one really is they just don't know what they don't know. If you look at anybody who's not a security professional, when you say cybersecurity, they really have no idea what that is, or information security. They could pick apart the words and maybe try to figure it out, but they wouldn't actually know what the day-to-day in that role actually looks like. So at the end of the day, it's just kind of an unknown entity to, I think, the average person, the average business owner who's not a security or IT professional. IT folks, obviously, they may have some security duties, so they kind of get it, but the average person probably doesn't. So I think the biggest threat really is just lack of awareness and understanding of what security is, why it's important, and and the basics of just security hygiene, which so many companies are completely unaware of. You go to a local doctor's clinic and you'll see all sorts of proprietary private personal information out there, just with really no regard to social security numbers hanging out there and that sort of thing. So really, I think it's important to help educate and just help these folks understand the importance of security and the basics of it.
So you've identified a gap in our industry, and that is that for small and mid-sized businesses, they don't know what they don't know, to use your words. And I agree with that. And it comes from not having folks on board that do know. But there's also a sense that I think with larger businesses, sometimes they have that issue as well. And now I want to bring us back to talking a little bit more in depth about the talent situation and the job market in information security. I hear a large disconnect. I see on LinkedIn a lot of folks who have been out there trying to get jobs, that they have certifications, they have experience, sometimes a good combination of both, and they're having issues trying to land the next job. And yet I see reports from organizations that we have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, I don't know what the number is, of open information security, cybersecurity jobs currently. And yet this seems to have been the narrative for like several years now. What's going on? What am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all boils down to profit motive. So if you're some sort of educational institution, you have a vested interest um, in the narrative, basically, that there is a huge shortage of security professionals. Thus, people need to go out and get these certifications, these degrees, go through these boot camps to be employable in the field. The reality on the ground is much different. At any given time, I would put the number at hundreds of entry level security jobs, but then we have tens of thousands of people that want those jobs. So there's just a huge mismatch, and I call it the talent bottleneck at the entry level, where we just have way too many people that want the few jobs that exist. And my question, especially on my podcast, is what do we do with all these folks? How do we redirect them? And unfortunately, I think the reality is some folks maybe just are not going to end up in tech, and they're going to end up in service jobs and blue collar stuff. So it's a quandary. And then at the higher end, we have like you said, tons of people that are looking for experienced security roles that maybe they're extremely well qualified for, and they can't find jobs. I think mostly because the hiring process is broken. Like you said, there's hundreds, thousands of applicants to any single job. And when there's that much noise and every internal recruiter is managing 20 plus open jobs on their desk at any given time, there's just way too much noise to signal to where people get a legit shot at a job. That's why I believe we're almost moving kind of backwards away from, ironically, I think the proliferation of AI and more automation and using systems to quote unquote improve your resume to make them quote unquote beat the ATS. It's causing then on the ATS side people to implement more automation. So you have automation on both sides, and there's no humans involved.
Yeah.
Except at the very end when somebody's going to either ignore or reject an application or possibly invite somebody to interview. But there's just a lot of people being overlooked because there's so much noise. I think a lot of it would be solved just by outbound recruiting. So when I do a search, I'm going out and I'm searching for people, I'm messaging them. It's all outbound. I don't rely on job postings. I don't wait for people to come to me because I want to go out and target the most ideal fits for a given role. I think if every recruiter did that, they would save everybody's time, and it would be a far more efficient way to do things. But as it is, with especially internal recruiters being so swamped with so many open jobs, they think really the only option is just to post them and hope for the best. So,
And I love the fact that you've brought the human back into the equation. That's one of the points that I make on occasion on LinkedIn, and rather immaturely, I will add, because this isn't my specialty. But I come from a background of when I have hired and when I still hire. For a lot of what if I do put a job posting out there, I've always been involved as the direct supervisor, as the one who's going to go through the resumes and the first one. And I understand that that hasn't been able to scale so much because we've got all this like spray and pray out there as far as job applications go, and that's why you have this broken process of AI talking to AI, hundreds of applications, and it gets to be unmanageable. And yet I am still convinced that the person hiring, so the direct supervisor, needs to have some measure of personal contact involved with this. Um, and I think what you said, as far as, let me make sure that I have like the terminology correct. You said outbound sourcing, right? And
Yep.
and and how a little bit more in detail. So let's just say that I'm a hiring manager. I want to hire. I'm in charge of information technology security. I want to hire a security analyst. I have a set of requirements of what they need to meet, and I contact someone like you. How does that process work?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, any external recruiter like myself, we need to get some sort of agreement in place before we go out and start working. Obviously, we want to make sure that if we do find somebody well qualified, that we get paid.
Of
And then at
course.
that point, we really hit the ground running. It's going out to LinkedIn, using LinkedIn Recruiter. That's a big tool that all of us good security recruiters use. Then, searching our internal database for folks that we've talked to in the past, asking for referrals, that sort of thing. A lot of it's using really complex Boolean search strings that we've developed an ability to create over the years. In fact, I've seen some folks, some other recruiters on LinkedIn posting what some of the large language models have spit out in terms of search strings, and very rudimentary, we'll say, compared to like a seasoned sourcer within a niche specialty like security. So there's a deep specialization that really helps in going out and finding people, and then crafting a tailored message to hit some of what you think those candidates' pain points might be. So, for instance, if I'm recruiting for a consulting firm, I've done that many times over the years, and I'm targeting folks from other consulting firms because that seems to be the go-to, hire people from direct competitors. I'll need to figure out, I'll think about what's in their head. Okay, what could their pain points possibly be right now? Chances are it's work-life balance if they're at a consulting firm, or they're being micromanaged on their billable hours, or they're looking for more opportunity for advancement because company politics or whatever, they're just not getting that opportunity in their current role. So I think about what that person might want to hear and what their pain points might be, craft a tailored message, reach out to them, then schedule a time to talk with them. And then from there, submit their resume to the hiring manager.
So you bring to the table, because you have this specialty of working just in cyber. I'll use cyber and infosec interchangeably here. I don't want to go down my path on
Mm-hmm.
my soapbox about how they're a little bit different, but the point that I wanted to make was that you actually speak the language. So if I come to you and I say that this person needs to have experience with Splunk, for example, or with DNS or something along those lines, I'm not talking keywords to you. I'm talking concepts that you understand. How does that help the process in ultimately landing the right candidate? And before you answer, the reason why I asked this is that the first thing that you said, as far as like when the engagement starts, is like, well, we got to get paid. We got to have an agreement because it's what we do. And some people might say, well, I don't need to pay someone. I can do it myself. You don't understand just how much this value is. It's worth it. If you get the wrong candidate in, how much money is lost on bringing them in, recruiting, training, and then they leave in 3 months. So now I lost my train of thought. So how is the how is that accomplished when all is said and done?
The great thing about understanding the terminology is I don't have to spend a lot of time on the front end researching and figuring out what these terms mean, because I already know what they mean. So I can hit the ground running, quote unquote, and
Mhm.
within the first few hours or the first day have a qualified candidate over that checks every box, because I've done it so many times. So there's, no guesswork, there's no ramp up time, and there's really no substitute for somebody that's highly, highly motivated and highly specialized to be able to get your results extremely quickly. So, it's like I always say, it's really just a time saving thing more than anything else. If you're spending 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 hours interviewing somebody that ends up not being a fit, and you do that multiple times over, how much easier on you would it be if on the front end you just had somebody packaged up in a pretty bow for you, and there was no guesswork. You knew if you talked to them that they were going to be spot on every single time. That's, I think, really the value. So yeah.
No, it's getting back to the talent bottleneck, which is related with this, and specifically, I wanted to talk about certs and degrees, and maybe more so certs, because I think about certifications, and I've been in the industry for a while, and I go back to when certifications really became a thing was like in the 90s, and usually when you got a cert, you were certifying your experience that you had already accomplished. And then something happened, and this concept of boot camp started. And the boot camps now promise that you can go through this thing for 2 weeks and you'll be immediately qualified to do whatever you're certified for. And I think that's been a big disservice to the industry over time, and that's created this bottleneck where you've got a lot of people that maybe are what we would call paper tigers back in the day, but really kind of push away those that are the diamonds in the rough. How do you navigate through that to find someone who is not a so-called paper tiger, but honestly and truly is qualified and will hit the ground running for their job once they start?
Yeah, that's something that's a little bit difficult, I think, to quantify. That's kind of where the art part of recruiting comes in versus the science. Like, I could tell you exactly, I won't, but I could break down exactly how my methodology works and how I get to the root of people's motivators and things like that to ensure longer term career matches. But when it comes to having the actual technical experience and expertise to do the actual job, it's like really anything in sales almost. Like you're doing more listening than you are talking. So it's about asking the right open-ended question and then just listening to how somebody talks about their job. There's a lot of little tells when somebody doesn't know what they're talking about, where they'll hesitate or they'll stumble over words. And obviously some of this could just be people not being articulate. But I think a big part of being an effective recruiter, especially in a highly technical discipline, is having some emotional intelligence to be able to read people and understand, when they're talking about a certain topic. Obviously, it has to match what I know about the topic, at least at a high level. That's one part of it, but then also just kind of reading if they understand what they're talking about, or if it seems like they're reading off of something that they just Googled. So it's a lot more art than science, I'd say.
Applied knowledge is how I would describe that. And so I'm going to give an example of a question that I used to ask. The technology is a little bit, depreciated now, but let me see if I understand what you just said correctly by giving this example. So I used to have a standard 2-part question that I would ask networking folks when I was hiring for network positions. The first one was, what protocol runs on TCP port 23? And the answer is Telnet. And just about everybody would get that. Second question I'd ask is, why don't you want to let that through your firewall? And some of them understood, okay, it's not an encrypted protocol, and therefore you've got plain text going through. Some of them would be stammered right there. Is that sort of the question that you're thinking about?
Well, those aren't generally the questions that I'm asking in the first recruiter screening, which is, I spend more time on motivators than I do on technical knowledge.
Okay.
And it's never been an issue where I've had somebody where the hiring manager said, "Oh, this person isn't qualified." I don't know if it's just because I've focused so much on the sweet spots of like GRC and DFIR and sales that I know so well. But I'm asking questions specific to that role that I know are going to reveal if that person is good at what they do or not. So I'm trying to think of an example. like in GRC. So if somebody is a SOC auditor, for instance, I'll ask them if they're doing all parts of the audit. So if they're doing, collection of evidence and field work and writing the report itself, which a lot of folks at the Big Four say don't, because they're so split up into teams and functional areas that they don't get that full life cycle experience. That's an example. Or like in sales, I'll ask if they're more of a hunter or a farmer, how they've hit their quotas, that sort of thing. So it's really dependent on the role. But yeah, often it's an open-ended question. Listen to them talk about their experience. And if I sense some sort of hesitation or something, I'll drill down on that until I get to the root of either why they're hesitant or allow them to kind of course correct.
A colleague of mine once mentioned to me, it's just like you never actually like leave a job to go somewhere. You're leaving because you're leaving something that you don't like. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the motivators come in. So, and I think this is key to really any sort of sales oriented role. And I'm not naive to think that, recruiting is not in some way a sales oriented role, but it's really uncovering pain, understanding why it is that somebody would consider a career move. And often what people tell you the first time is not the actual reason. So you have to drill down past the surface and ask more probing questions. Again, that's where that emotional intelligence comes in. They may say, oh, I'm just kind of looking for a change right now, not feeling really fulfilled. So I'll ask, so what does that mean for you? What is it that you're not getting in your current role that you'd be looking for in your next role? And it's very context dependent. So I've trained a few recruiters at this point, and that to me is the hardest thing to teach, is that that genuine interest in people and not just taking the first answer that they give you, but drilling down past that. And that takes a certain level of, I don't know what it is, just a sense for it, I guess.
I was smiling about it. Probably everybody has some sort of examples in their past about it, but I worked with a recruiter who kind of went down that path. And when you first start talking with her, at least from my perspective, when I first started talking, I'm like, well, yeah, I like my job, but I'm kind of looking for something a little bit different. I don't feel like I'm as challenged as I want to be. And it's salary, maybe I'm not really that worried, whatever. But no, Greg, why do you really want to leave? Because my job sucks. Because I'm in a toxic environment. And then that actually, I didn't come out quite that unprofessionally there. I kind of shook my headset there. But in reality, I can almost say that for the most part, usually it is leaving something in some way in my career as well. I have one other extraordinarily important question to ask you with regards to looking for jobs. And if you don't want to answer or give your opinion, I understand. But this is a very important question. LinkedIn green banner, yes or no?
I think it could go either way. I tend to favor the idea that it helps more on average than it hurts. And obviously there are certain situations where it could be more in one camp or the other, but I would say on average, it helps more than it hurts. So especially some internal recruiters where they don't have a whole lot of time to work on any single role because they have 20 or 30 open jobs. If they are doing outbound sourcing, like I think they should be, they may sort by open to work first. Like there's a whole function within LinkedIn Recruiter to be able to do that. So, if you don't have it turned on, then if they're doing that specific search using that way to filter candidates, then you're not going to show up. And nobody ever does it the opposite way, as far as I'm aware, to where they're searching for people that aren't open to work, because that wouldn't make any sense. Unless you had, of course, the bias that, people that aren't actively looking are more qualified, which don't get me started on that one. There's lots of biases out there. But yeah, I guess that's my answer.
We could go down this path. I'm sure that there's a lot to talk about, but that's what the Talent Gap Fireside Chat podcast is all about. So you can consider this a little bit of a taste of what that podcast is about. So look forward to the next episode there. But all of this can be stressful. I imagine that also on the recruiting side, it can be stressful as well too, particularly when I guess one example might be where you think you have like a deal worked out and something falls through in the end. And I don't want to go into a discussion there because that could take another hour. What do you do to help decompress from the stress though?
Yeah, and certainly you are correct about that. If there's one thing I've learned in recruiting, it's that people are not predictable; they're fickle. So yeah, there's a million times where that'll happen, and at the end of the day, you just have to keep getting up and staying persistent. It's just a matter of effort over time, and it's a numbers game in recruiting, just like I believe job seeking is. It's a mixture of quality and quantity in your outreach to people to get the thing that you want. If you're a job seeker, it's the job. If you're a recruiter, it's the right candidate or the right client. So all that to say, I think to relax for me, it's all about nature, like literally just touching grass, getting sunshine. Vitamin D has been proven to genuinely improve mood. And I think most people, I read somewhere, are vitamin D deficient in the US. So
Yeah.
that's a simple one.
Yeah, and you can get a good dose of vitamin D. You just walk out and the sunshine just produces it for you. And I know during the COVID pandemic, that was one of the things that they were saying is like keep your vitamin D levels up. That'll help deflect, and I think it works all around. So definitely agree. And just to clarify, you said that you should touch grass, not smoke it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
But I know some people take that tact as well.
Another topic for another day. What plans you got coming up? Well, your podcast is on hiatus and it's coming back soon, or?
Yeah, it's well, should be launching again in February. I just need to bank a few more episodes. So looking for more guests if anybody's a hiring manager and interested in these topics. But yeah, that'll be launching again in February, and yeah, really just growing the firm.
Awesome. Well, Pete, wonderful way to wrap up the year. Appreciate the conversation. Certainly a topic that is near and dear to a lot of the folks out there, particularly those that are looking to make career moves. And thank you for all the work that you do in that field, because I mean, I can say personally, I've worked with several from your field in the past, and it has helped me immensely in my career. So thank you very much for all that you do.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Greg.
And everybody, stay secure.